Hello, hello everyone. How you guys doing? My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. What's happening? Today we are, of course, once again talking about gun deaths, mass shootings, and the Great Replacement Theory. Kind of seems like we are repeating ourselves here a little bit, doesn't it? I remember having a stream about this very subject not that long ago, less than a year ago. Had a stream about this exact same thing. In particular the Great Replacement Theory, and it just seems like we seem to be going in circles in this country, wouldn't you say? Anyway, folks, but before we jump into that, everybody out there, please like and subscribe, all that stuff, and let's take a look at what we're doing right now. This is the piece that we have. So looking pretty good. I think right around this lower right corner down here is where we're going to work today because you see there's like a seam that's running through this, so we're going to eliminate that. And then after that, I think we could actually probably start coloring it. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's just zoom in like that. Lower left down there. There we go. So, this, of course, is the Great Replacement Theory is in the news again because I'm sure you've all heard there was another ridiculously horrific mass shooting, this time in Buffalo, New York. And what it was a guy named Peyton Gendron, who was 18 years old and a white supremacist who was radicalized and specifically drove out to this place in order to shoot black people. And we know he did that because that's what he told us. He grew up, he lived in an area that was about 200 miles southwest of where the shooting took place. So this guy got in his car and he contemplated going to a couple of other areas first, but then he wanted to go to this particular area of Buffalo because the concentration of black people were more. Lewis the Hedgehog, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining. The concentration of his intended targets were like higher in the population there. And so he drove 200 miles to this area to go to this specific grocery store in order to shoot black people, right? Um, so what happens is that this guy, Peyton Gendron, shows up, gets out of his car, shoots four people in the parking lot, and then enters the store, shoots nine more people, 10 of which who have died, so 13 people total. But, a couple survived. Apparently, there was a white person that he pointed his gun at, and then he stopped and apologized to, and then went on to shoot other black people. Although apparently also he did eventually shoot two people who are not black, so I don't know. Um, and it was pretty fucking horrible. So everything that you assume about this guy seems to be true. He's a white nationalist, white supremacist. Um, he seems to come from a conservative family. Apparently, his mother gave him a firearm for Christmas a few years back. So there you go. He was already like super into guns anyway, and that kind of thing. And he, yeah, was radicalized on the internet, right? And his main motivating reason for doing this, according to him, was the Great Replacement Theory. We know this because the guy wrote a 180-page manifesto, very similar to the Christchurch shooter back in 2019. And if you guys remember the Christchurch shooter, that was a guy that in New Zealand who went into a mosque and shot 51 people to death. We'll talk more about him in a minute. So, a little bit about some mass shootings here before we go on a little further. There have been so far in the United States in 2021 about 198 mass shootings. It is May right now, so we're roughly halfway through 2021. Already 198 mass shootings. A mass shooting is an event that has four or more injuries or casualties. So that's happened in our country 198 times already. This is actually kind of low for the United States, right? On average, the United States has around three or 400 of these a year. Last year, we had 693 mass shootings in 2021, 693 mass shootings. So we don't know if last year was an outlier because of the, lockdowns and stuff like that. Murder was up in general last year. So it could very well be that that was just the result of people flipping their lids up from, cabin fever or whatnot. Still, it seems like any number above zero would be unacceptable when it comes to, the number of mass shootings, the number of people who die in events where some psychopath shows up with a gun and blows away multiple people at a time. Seems like you want that number to be as low as humanly possible, right? Just a couple of other little factoids before we move on here. Last year in the United States, 2021, there were 45,222 people killed by firearms total in the United States. 45,000. In Japan last year, there were 17. In the United Kingdom, there were 30. So let's just put that in perspective. You know, in Canada, it was way lower. It was like less than like 1,000 in Canada. You know, France had around like 200. So these are other countries, like Canada, for example. You're allowed to own firearms in Canada, but why do they have like way less gun deaths than we do? You know, kind of seems like something is wrong with our society, where something's wrong with the United States, where we are the people that just seem to be blowing each other away so much, right? Of those 45,000, roughly half of that were suicides, right? One thing that happens is that when you speak to conservatives about this kind of thing, they always brush off the suicides. They say, suicides don't count. I beg to differ. I don't know why you would say suicides don't count as gun deaths. You know, I guess, the rationale being, well, they would just figure out some other way to kill themselves. We have no way of knowing that. We don't know that maybe they would just be like, oh, well, if there's no easy, convenient way where I can end it all instantly, maybe they would change their mind. Maybe if they actually did have to hang themselves or throw themselves off a bridge or something like that, slit their wrists or whatever, rather than just instantly, like, putting a shotgun to their head and ending it. You might, you don't know what's going through somebody's head, and it very well could be that suicides may, the number of suicides may go down if easy access to firearms wasn't a thing, but we'll never know because of, Republicans. We'll never know. We will never be able to experiment and figure out if that's the case because Republicans, want to play with their toys or whatever. So, so that means that 43% of these that number were murders, which comes to around 19,384 in a year. Think about that. And that's just the official numbers that get collected. Remember, these numbers, when they come to the CDC, they are essentially secondhand. And there are police departments around the country that just don't collect these numbers at all. They just don't collect stats on, how many people in their town or city or whatever were killed by firearms or whatever method. They just don't do it. We know this. We know in particular in a lot of red states, they just don't collect this information. So this is just like, chances are there's a number, this number, in real life, this number is way higher, right? We have no way of knowing that. But still, if that was the official number, that's pretty freaking high. 19,384 murders by firearm, pretty freaking high. The rest of that comes, the rest of that number that's left over, about, this is according to the CDC, 535 were unintentional. So that means they're accidents, right? So people accidentally shooting themselves in the face when they're playing with a gun, something like that. There you go. See, that looks much better. Um, Whatever. So those definitely would be, resolved if we had some smart gun control. And then the remainder, 611, comes from law enforcement, right? 611 people killed by law enforcement in this country alone. I'm sure some of those were justified. See, that's the thing, every once in a while we get a famous, a case of police brutality that gets really famous and gets on the news and causes people to go out and protest and all that stuff, right? But yeah, that's how many times, and that's the, 611, that's what they admit to. So we don't even know how many other times, how many other cases of police shootings actually happen in this country that we just never hear about, because what? Because it wasn't egregious enough, you know, maybe it was, you know, use of force may have been somewhat justified, but maybe not use of your firearm, something like that. We just will never know. And how many of the cases that we hear about happen and then we find out about them years later? Something like, oh, 2 years ago, this, 14-year-old kid was blown away by cops, when they shot him in the back, something. How many times does that happen? And we just don't hear about it for, ever, or we hear about it years later, and by the time we hear about it, it's sort of over with, and it doesn't cause, it doesn't manage to get in the news cycle. See, that's the kind of country we're living in, right? Where we tolerate this type of, this type of thing. And for everybody out there who's like, saying, yeah, but these are criminals, blah, 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 remember that the people that support, police brutality, the people that want us to be able to own firearms so that we can kill each other, are the same people who are trying to take away your ability to get a legal abortion, right? So when they say shit like, yeah, we have a right to life and we support a right to life. In real life, no, they don't support a right to life. They just support they just want to kill people when they feel like killing people. That's really it. You know, I bet they would, I bet if we could, like, I don't know, somehow work the Second Amendment into abortion, like, I bet if we like line fetuses up with a firing squad or something and let police kill the fetuses, I'm pretty sure conservatives would be into that. If we could somehow say like, yeah, this baby committed a crime and didn't follow police orders, right? This fetus, like, all it had to do was obey the police orders and then the cops wouldn't have shot it. I'm pretty sure they would agree to that. Maybe we could kill two birds with one stone there, right, folks? Turn ridiculous conservative morality against itself. Anyway, so moving on to the actual subject of today's stream. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there because we really can't talk about mass shootings without talking about the number of people in this country who die every year from guns and how it's just like, one of those little quirks of American society which basically distinguishes us from the rest of the world. You don't really find this problem anywhere else in the world. Not really. This is like mostly a uniquely American problem. You may find it in some country, maybe like Brazil, maybe might have like a similar problem, right? But even still, like, there are more shootings here than there are in countries like fucking Beirut. I mean, it's really, one of these days, in fact, I think I remember doing several streams on this in the past. So, if anybody out there wants to take the Pepsi challenge on that and see, like, which countries in the world you're more likely to die from gun violence, I'll do that any day of the week. You know, if we're not, I don't think we're number one, but we're definitely in the top five. That's for sure. I don't know. I guess it's good to know that Americans are still good at something, right? We're still good at something. It's like, okay, well, we may not be able to, like, build a decent car anymore, right? May not be able to do that. We might not be able to feed our hungry or take care of our sick, but god damn it, we can murder each other in greater numbers than anybody else, especially when it involves a firearm, right, folks? Anyway, enough cynical, enough of that shit. Let's talk about what actually happened in Buffalo, right? So, this guy, of course, his name was, I got it here, Peyton Gendron, right? He, of course, was motivated by what's called the Great Replacement Theory, right? And the Great Replacement Theory is essentially rebranding of the white genocide conspiracy theory, right? Which is this idea that white people are, because white people have lower birth rates, usually around the world, then they're somehow going to like end up extinct, right? And that's basically, like other races and stuff have higher birth rates, and so they're just going to outbreed all the white people, right? Which is complete and total bullshit of the highest order. It is not true. It's not happening anywhere in the world. There's no place in the world where the number of white people is significantly decreasing every year. Not really. Not even in places like fucking South Africa. No. Right. Not happening. Especially in European countries and Western countries in the United States and the Americas. It's just not happening. It's just basically what's going on is that white people have less children. And the reason why white people have less children is because they make more money. When you make more money, you tend to have smaller families. And the reason why you have smaller families is because you have other things to take care of. You have careers, stuff like that. Especially when women um are higher educated, have more, have higher educations, right? And tend to make more money. They have fewer children and they have them later in life, because they have other shit to care about, right? And it's really, societies that sort of focus around like traditional agricultural like societies, where people like the majority of the country is like focused on growing food. Those are the countries where you tend to have super gigantic families, right? And it's because, well, why? Because you need like lots of people to help you out on the farm. And the United States was like that too, up until about 100 years ago. You ever read about your great grandparents or whatever and how they had 17 children? It's because, well, first off, there really wasn't much else to do when the lights went out. Right. And, this is before everybody had access to condoms or whatever. So that's one thing. And secondly, you would have like 16 kids because you needed them to help you on the farm, and half of them would probably die within 5 years anyway, right? Well, nowadays we live in cities, the majority of us, and we don't need to have, 47 children anymore to go help, in the wheat fields and pick corn and shit like that. We don't need that anymore, right? And, we can have smaller families because also our children tend to survive, because of advanced modern medicine and all that stuff. Even though the United States still does have an abnormally high um, infant death rate for a developed, first world nation or whatever. The infant death rate is still extremely high in the United States. It's smaller in like Cuba has a better like infant mortality rate than we do, you know, which is like it's fucking embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. It's like, dude, this is like we're supposed to be like I don't know. I don't know. Any other conservative out there that says they believe in a right to life too, just point that factoid out to them too. It's like, well, how come if you believe in a right to life, you don't want to do anything about the fucking infant mortality rate in this country? right? Because you know where that comes from? That comes from poor access to healthcare. That's why infants tend to die more in the United States because people who have kids don't have a lot of money and they only go to the hospital when fucking they really need to and infants can like just die for like no reason, so it's like, well, you should have took them to the hospital when you could, but you can't when you don't have any money. So anyway, that's a subject for a different day, for a different stream there. So yeah, that's the main reason why, right? But this has become a big conspiracy on the left, on the right wing, excuse me, right? And of course, it's because of shadowy figures that are controlling the world, the Illuminati, the Jews, the corporations, stuff like that, and who are somehow purposely driving down white birth rates in order to, I don't know, make white people go extinct for some fucking dumb reason, which is bullshit, of course. Remember, this is all bullshit. And anybody out there who's just tuning in now and missed the first part of the stream, I'm not supporting any of this stuff. This is all, I'm debunking it. That's what I'm doing. So, anyway, the Great Replacement, though, is sort of a subset of white genocide. And what the Great Replacement says is that the same shadowy figures that I just mentioned, the supposed rulers of the world, the evil Jewish cabal of space reptilians or whatever, what they're doing is importing people from third world nations in order to supplant and eventually replace white people especially when it comes to Western democracies. So the idea being that, well, they're making it easy on purpose for people to immigrate here so that they will vote for liberals, in particular vote for Democrats, right? This this sounds kind of fringe, right? It's not fringe. This used to be a fringe thing like 20 years ago, right? Because people were saying this exact same shit 20 years ago. Please keep in mind, none of this stuff is new, right? One thing about white supremacists and white nationalists and all these other fucking people is that they do not have, you know, any originality at all. They have very bad imaginations, and so they tend to just repeat the same shit over and over and over again with just a little bit of a spin on it, right? So this idea that like, that Democrats were allowing like illegal immigrants to come into the country so that they'll vote for Democrats is something that's been around at least 30 years. I remember hearing about this shit back in the 90s, right? From mainstream Republicans, not just you know, from the crazy racist types, right? It actually comes originally from a book in 1972 called The Camp of the Saints, right? Well, first off, there was a book written in France by a white supremacist named Renaud Camus, and his book was The Great Replacement, which he wrote in 2012, which basically lays all of this stuff out, right? But like I said, these ideas are not new. And this guy Camus originally got the idea for the Great Replacement, as he listed it out, in from a book called The Camp of the Saints, right? And we've kind of talked about this before in the past. So I'll just go over it very briefly. Camp of the Saints was a book written by um, Jean Sapil in 1972, and it describes it's sort of a fictional story about mass immigration destroying Western civilization, right? And it should be no surprise that Trump advisor Stephen Miller, this was one of his favorite books. Remember Stephen Miller? Stephen Miller is the reason why we had the immigrant child detainee camps. That was Stephen Miller, right? Also, keep in mind, Stephen Miller is Jewish. So, kind of goes to show it's like, you know, it's not your religion. that determines if you believe in this ridiculous white supremacist stuff. Right. These are he's sharing ideas. This is because you instantly you think Nazi when you think these things, right? You think, oh, great replacement, just a bunch of fucking Nazis. It's like, yeah, Stephen Miller's not a Nazi, but there are degrees of white supremacism. Keep that in mind, folks, right? It's not all black and white. Not everybody that opposes you is the same, right? Sometimes they will even oppose each other, which you know, we will get into a little bit more when we talk about this guy's manifesto, right? Anyway, so yeah, it's Camp of the Saints basically describes scenes of immigrants from like India and stuff coming to France and swarming like vermin is the way they're described, right? And then also scenes of like massive orgies and stuff like that. You know, it's very we could read some. It's very not safe for work, put it that way. Um, so there was a YouTuber named Lauren Southern who's still around. She was one of the early proponents of the Great Replacement theory. Lauren Southern is famous for joining with a group called Identity Europa or Generation Identify, right? Which was like, it's like, Identity Europa is sort of like a white supremacist, like neo-Nazi kind of group. And what they did is they went out onto the Mediterranean to try to stop boats of immigrants from landing in like Italy, you know. So they would basically go out and try to block, boats of like refugees and stuff like that. And, so that they just can't land and they end up starving to death and shit like that. So that's what she got famous for, you know, trying to prevent people from like, coming in and starting a new life for themselves after their war-torn country was destroyed by the bombs which we manufacture and which our soldiers dropped in many cases, right? Uh, you know, so that's fucking bad. She, of course, got off of YouTube for a little while and, hid from public life after all of this stuff happened, after she started getting backlash for being a fucking Nazi, and has rebranded herself and has come out, and is trying to basically promote the cleaned up version of white nationalism. But if you actually listen to what Lauren Southern says, she's saying all the exact same shit. She's just pretending to not be part of the alt right anymore. But you hear them talk about the new right. If you ever hear that term, the new right, it's the exact same thing as the alt right. Like they say, like the alt right, the brand of the alt right is sort of toxic now. It's been sullied because of things like Charlottesville and all of that. So all of these content creators that were like associated with the alt-right are trying to like move away from that brand. And so they're saying things like we're the new right. You'll hear Paul Joseph Watson, for example, say he's part of the new right instead of the alt-right or something. It's the exact same fucking thing. It's the exact same people, exact same ideas, exact same bullshit, right? And they still promote stuff like the Great Replacement theory. you know. So anyway, so this, of course, this is not the first time. Well, actually, I want to talk a little bit. We talked about white birth rates declining in Western nations, and of course, Great Replacement says that somehow white people are the governments of these nations are responsible for that. Like it's the governments of these nations which are somehow doing something in order to prevent white people from, in order to prevent white people from having more babies, which they never really seem to say what that is. You'll get, depending on how wacky the person you're listening to is, it'll either be economically, while they're keeping wages low so white people can have babies, whatever, or it'll be even like, the more um, crazy wackaloons will say some shit like, that they're poisoning white people, that fertility rates are going down because of like, shit that the government's putting in the water, stuff like that. Now you got to remember, all of these things do have a little element of truth to it. It actually is true that fertility rates are going down, but it has nothing to do with some ridiculous conspiracy theory about like commies putting like chemicals in the water in order to sap your precious bodily fluids or whatever the fuck, right? That's not the case. It's because of basically diet and pollution is the reason why fertility rates are going down. It has to do with things like, PVC, plastic chemicals and shit in the water, that kind of thing, right? And just like very bad, like, people eating bad food and not exercising and that stuff like that, and just general pollution. And that actually does have an effect on fertility rates. And it's not just women who, have their fertility, like, impacted by these things. It's men too, you know. That is definitely a true thing, but it's not, the thing is, it's not a conspiracy by reptilian aliens or Illuminati, like councils of Illuminati Jewish people that are like running everything. That's not the case at all. That is something that is happening across all ethnic groups. It's not just white people. It's in developed countries. Fertility rates for all ethnic groups are going down. That's true. Like the only ethnic group where it actually went up was Pacific Islanders, right? So if you're concerned about that, then there are things you can do about it. In particular, you can support efforts to reduce pollution. You can eat organic stuff like that, right? Get filter your water, that kind of thing. Excuse me. This always happens. Every time I start talking, my throat gets all fucked up. Hang on a second. Stream interrupted. Is it back? My stream? Can you guys still see me? I hope I'm still streaming. Hang on a second, folks. This is not good at all. Why is it that all my audience totally disappeared? I do not like this. Can you guys can you guys hear me? Can you guys still see me? Okay, well, looks like I'm still streaming. I don't know what the hell happened there. Sorry about that. Excuse me. This happens every time. Every time I start streaming, my throat gets all fucked up and I have to take like 3 minutes to like clear my fucking throat and shit. Sorry, folks. I don't know why it does that. It's probably because I'm drinking coffee while I do this. I probably shouldn't drink coffee while I'm like streaming. Anyway, so hopefully the stream didn't get interrupted too bad there. Sorry about that. It says I have excellent signal strength, so don't know what's causing that problem. Anyway, so where were we? So yeah, it's let's see, where were we? We were talking about birth rates and stuff like that, right? So moving on from that, what time is it? 11:34. The thing about this, the Great Replacement theory and all that, just like any like conspiracy theory, especially when it comes to like racist sort of white supremacist conspiracy theories, is that it falls apart when you just have the smallest amount of scrutiny, right? So what's the idea? The idea is like, okay, they want to, first off, what you'll hear from like Tucker Carlson or something like that is that they'll say they want to import people of different ethnicities in order to supplant white voters. This is the angle that Tucker Carlson takes, right? He'll say that the Democrats are allowing immigration illegally or otherwise, and he includes legal immigration in this as well, right? And things like not just immigration but refugees and all this other stuff, and that the Democrats are doing this on purpose so that the people that they import will vote for Democrats, right? And that is complete and total horseshit of the highest order. If you just examine who these people are, how they vote, you realize that most of the people that come here come from very traditional backgrounds, right? So let's take immigrants from south of the border, from Mexico, from South America, stuff like that, right? People in those countries are extremely religious. Excuse me. God damn it. Sorry. All right, drinking some stuff. Like Mexico in particular. Mexico is a very Catholic country, you know, and a lot of them, like in South America, are extremely religious people there. People there have very conservative views when it comes to things like sexuality, when it comes to things like abortion, when it comes to things like gay rights. Very, very, conservative, right? And you would think that the Republicans and the conservatives would understand this and try to covet these people, and they did for a little while. It seemed like it, like back in 2012 and stuff. You know, when they had Mitt Romney run for president, and Mitt Romney goes and he speaks Spanish and stuff like that, and he tried to appeal to Latino voters and that kind of thing, right? It seemed like that was one way they were going, and then when they saw that didn't work, the GOP just doubled down on the racism, right? So that's not always the case. There's a very large like segment of the Latino population in the United States who supported Donald Trump, right? So it's like they're not, that's not always the case. It's like it doesn't really. I mean, especially if you're talking about like say like Syrian refugees, African immigrants, stuff like that. Those people are very, very conservative. I mean, when it comes to social issues in particular, you know, extremely conservative, right? Like, I mean, shit. Talk about like gay rights to somebody from the Middle East. Like, they don't really tend to support those things as a demographic, right? So that's one thing that doesn't really make any sense. Why would you import people who are going to vote for against stuff that you support, right? Secondly, the thing is that when somebody comes, like say as a refugee or especially as an immigrant, like if you come as an immigrant like legally, right, it can take a very, very, very long time to actually get citizenship, right? Sometimes this can take upwards of 20 years. It can be something, it could be like 22, 23, 24 years, depending on, and it's so if you're talking about, well, they want to like bring people in so that they can vote Democrats, like, well, when? 20 fucking years from now? Like, so that they can steal so they can steal like the fucking 2062 election? Like, the 2042 election or whatever. Like, is that what you're talking about? Like, it doesn't really make any sense, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. And it's because it's bullshit. Like this is the thing is that, conservatives don't think about this shit, right? They don't think about this shit because conservatives don't really think. They just sort of react. And that's why they're conservative, right? So even if you try to explain any of these things, it's just going to bounce right off. It's really kind of like it's a failure of the educational system in this country that people don't understand this, and it's also a failure of let's put the blame where it belongs. It's also a failure of the democratic establishment for not fighting back for this kind of thing. How come they don't have people debunking this shit? You know what I mean? Like the democratic establishment, like the Democrats, right, should have like say a fucking YouTube channel where they go and they debunk this stuff and say this stuff is not true. When Tucker Carlson gets up and says blah 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 blah, it's bullshit. And it should be coming out of the mouth of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders should be saying this. AOC should be saying this, right? They should be debunking this stuff and saying like, when you hear, you know, somebody like Matt Gates like repeat and parrot this shit, they should be calling him out on it. They should be making ads and playing them in his district, and saying exactly what he's saying and exactly what's wrong about what he's saying and exactly how he's lying to people. You know, it seems to me like if your political opponents were lying every single day and spouting racist shit every single day, then you would have a ton of ammunition to like use against them, right? And so let's keep that in mind. Like the only people that, the only alternative to these people are fucking so ineffectual. It's like I just don't understand that shit. Maybe that's a stream for another time, because I don't want to get into that because then I'll start talking about how, I'll start talking about Trump and shit like that and how anybody with a brain should have been able to defeat Trump. But anyway, let's move on from that. Sorry. I'm going to try to keep from getting into tangents and shit as a new rule. Anyway, another variant of the great replacement theory, of course, is that immigrants come to this country, legal or otherwise, in order to get on the public dole, in order to get on, welfare and just get free money from the government, get your free Obama phone or whatever. You guys remember the Obama phone fucking conspiracy, which is fucking the stupidest shit ever, you know? Get your free food stamps, that kind of thing, and just not have to work because, we in the United States treat our poor so well. This is, of course, bullshit at all, but, complete bullshit. Because, first off, illegal immigrants are not, especially if you're like an illegal, like cross the border illegally type person, if you're like an undocumented immigrant, right? And not just like, you know, somebody else. If you're like undocumented, you don't qualify for anything. You don't get any type of help or welfare or anything like that at all, you know. I think like the most you can do is I think you can get a driver's license in like, California. And I think that's it. And there may be like assistance programs where like, they'll give you food so you don't starve to death, right? That kind of thing in some sanctuary cities, they may have programs like that. But you don't get welfare, you don't get unemployment, you don't get Medicare, Medicaid, anything like that. You don't get, the state just straight up giving you money for no reason. No, that's that's not true at all. That's complete total fucking bullshit, right? And even if you did get that, we don't really offer much in the way of welfare in this country, right? The social safety net in the United States is fucking minuscule. We don't really have paid sick leave, not as like a national rule anywhere, right? It's different depending on what state you're in, and there really isn't any state that gives you the kind of paid sick leave that you would get in, say, Canada or the UK or France or something like that, right? We don't have universal health care. So if you get sick here, there's, the excuse that they come here and clog up our hospitals. That's bullshit, right? You don't get universal health care. You don't get health care if you can't afford it here, then you don't get it. That's what our healthcare is the just kick me in the nuts healthcare because you ain't getting shit. Right? That's the kind of healthcare we have in the United States, right? I mean, yeah, sure, if you show up at an emergency room with a pole rammed through your head or something like that, they'll fucking save your life. But if you just try to get normal healthcare and you don't got no money, sorry, come back when you fucking win the lottery because you ain't getting shit. That's what we have here. They, in Europe and other countries, in Canada, in fucking like even Cuba has better access to healthcare than we do. Yeah, right. And I bring Cuba up because Cuba's like a country with like no resources. Cuba has like zero resources, right? Cuba, like, basically for decades just lived off of like, handouts from the Soviet Union and shit. Right. They've been living under a trade embargo from the United States for fucking like 50 years and stuff like that. So Cuba is not some major economic powerhouse, right? Yet they're able to get better access to their people for healthcare than we do. You know, they have a lower infant mortality rate in Cuba than we do. How does that make any sense? How is this country that we're purposely like trying to starve for like literally like 50 years and shit, able to do things that we're not able to do in our country with all of our massive resources and our trillions and trillions of dollars and our budget, which is like fucking ridiculous, 3.4 trillion dollar budget or whatever the fuck it was this year. I don't even know. How are they able to do shit that we, consistently able to come out ahead, when you compare their healthcare system to ours? It doesn't, it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment, you know. It's like we're living in it's like we're sort of like in a failed state almost. Like borderline failed state. Like it's fine if you're rich in the United States, it's great, but it's sort of like that anywhere in the world. If you were rich in Somalia, it's a great place to live. Okay. Seriously. If you're rich in fucking like, name some like war-torn messed up country, Beirut or something, you know, it's a great place to live. It's like we don't measure countries on what it's like for rich people to live there. We measure the quality of life for what it is for the average person. And the quality of life for the average person in the United States is declining, you know, which is really fucked up. And anyway, moving on. So yeah, we don't have any of that stuff. Other countries offer things like universal basic income. Australia, Finland, France, Saudi Arabia, these places have universal basic income, right? Iran, Iran, sorry, I pronounced that wrong. They have a form of universal basic income that we don't have that here. I mean, so why would you want to come to the United States in order to take advantage of programs when the programs we have in the United States don't fucking do anything? It's because it's not true. It's because that's a bullshit excuse that conservatives and shit make up because they have to come up with some dumbass fucking thing in order to justify their hate and racism. That's really what it is, right? Anyway, and remember, you don't get any of that stuff anyway. The actual programs we do have, things like SNAP, food stamps, that kind of thing, you don't get any of that when you're not a citizen, and you're just not instantly a citizen when you come over as a refugee or something. That's not the case. You don't just like show up, okay, welcome to the United States. Here's your voter registration card. Here's your free welfare check. No, that's not true. So keep all that stuff in mind too. Let's see. I think it's mainly cleaned up, wouldn't you say? So maybe we can start actually coloring it. Let's see. Let's put another layer behind this, and then let's make this layer multiply. So now when we color behind it, it should appear, right? And let's go up here. Let's do sort of a weird zombie fleshy bluish gray, right? And let's see, let's just make that the entire thing. There we go. Then let's go up here. Let's do something a little darker. And we'll just start at a corner and start working our way down, right? This might take a very, very long time, but that's all right. Anyway, so yeah, great replacement theory kind of has like, zero basis in fucking reality, right? But that's what this guy was motivated for. And so when this happened, this school shooting, well, actually, let's read some comments and then we can continue on. Well, we only have a couple of comments, but Lewis the Hedgehog, life is precious until it leaves the womb, then kill it with an AR-15. Yes, exactly. Exactly, and like I said, I mean, I don't know. That kind of sounds like a George Carlin routine, huh? Like if you could like say volunteer fetuses to be used in target practice or something like that. I'm sure that like if pregnant women could go up and just say, you can legalize abortion as if you can do it with an AR-15 and snipe like the fetus out of somebody's womb. I'm sure the conservatives would go for that. I don't know. I'm sure there's something hilarious there. I just can't really I don't know. Have to work that out. Anyway, plus it was cheaper to have children back then. Yes, it was. It was life in general was cheaper Well, first off, if you're talking about like the 19th century and stuff, right? Yeah, it was definitely cheaper overall to live. I mean, if you were a landowner, and even if you didn't own like a lot of land, but you just like a sharecropper or something, people tended to grow their own food mostly back then. All right, that's too dark. We need to make that a little lighter, right? So if you like lived on a farm or something, and you could conceivably be mostly self-sustaining, like most people in the country didn't really do that though. They grew cash crops. You know what I mean? Things like tobacco and cotton and stuff like that. And maybe they'd have like a few cows and a couple of chickens or whatever. But I remember like, my grandfather telling me like back in the Great Depression when it hit, his family had a farm. And so for a couple of years, they just sort of lived off the land, and they were lucky to not be in an area that was affected by like the Dust Bowl. So they were cool and they generally survived the Depression okay. They just didn't really have a lot of money, but, just fucking grew their own food and had their own milk and stuff like that for a few years and they were okay. My grandmother, on the other hand, lived in a city and ended up in an orphanage and got, measles and mumps and rubella and all of these other diseases and stuff and was all fucked up. And that was probably a contributing factor to her developing muscular dystrophy later on in life. The fact that she was very like exposed to all of these different diseases and had like, you know, um, had sort of like a like very unhealthy childhood, you know. So it's like, yeah, there you go. There's the good, even within my own family. It's like there's a good contrast of that, like of how access to wealth and just just nutrition in general, stuff like that can have very like um, different effects on the outcome of somebody's life, right? Anyway, let's see. Who else we got? Stream. Okay, looks like the stream's back now. So yeah, sorry about that. It says I have like massively good like connection here. Maybe I ought to just go get like a super long Ethernet cable and plug it in. Right. I moved to a new place, and my new place has like the connection I'm getting is like twice what it was in my old place. So I'm just doing this all wirelessly. So that's probably why it's occasionally getting interrupted. Adversary Fandom 2, the American healthcare. Pray you don't get sick. Exactly. And it's really embarrassing, right? And I remember making a lot of videos about this, like right around the time Obamacare was being like, promoted and stuff like that, and the debate around it, and how the GOP tried 63 times to overturn it and all of that. And it really doesn't, I don't understand how people can be against giving health care to people. I really don't understand that. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't get when it comes to, my political adversaries, right? And it's like, but sometimes you can understand things. Sometimes you can say, okay, well, they have concerns about this or that, whatever, right? But one thing I really do not get is how anyone would say that, oh, we should take some government money that we collect in taxes and use that to help people get health care. And how somebody can say, no, I don't want to do that. I do not understand that. That really does not like, seems to me that's exactly what tax money should be used for, right? Seems to me like, like if you read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence where it says, to make a more perfect union and to provide for the general welfare, seems like healthcare falls right into that mandate. I mean, I know that's not a legally binding document or anything, but still kind of shows, especially when you come to conservatives who are always talking about the founders' intent, right? Seems to me that the founders listed their intent in black and white right there, provide for the general welfare, right? That means that the government is supposed to take care of people. Doesn't that mean that, right? Sounds like it means like that. That's what it means to me. The government is supposed to take care of people, right? So when you get people saying that the government is not responsible for providing for the general welfare, kind of seems a little bit against what the founding fathers wanted, right? Generally, I don't give a shit about what the founding fathers wanted, but this is an argument that you get a lot from conservatives. They're always talking about, we have to have the original intent of the fucking, especially like the more libertarian you are, the more likely you are to use this as an argument to say that, the original intent of the founders. And then they always use that to say shit like, well, the founders didn't intend for us to like have welfare at all. And the founders didn't intend for us to regulate, this business or that or whatever. But no, it fucking says it right there. The founders intended to provide for the general welfare. So why the fuck are we not doing it? You know, that's what I don't get. And that's like, I think really does illustrate a lot, like how conservatism just really is like ideologically bankrupt. It seriously is ideologically bankrupt. They pick and choose what they want. And the thing is, it's like don't try to claim that you're like this consistent sort of like, that you have this like consistent political theory when in real life you just sort of do whatever the fuck you want and justify it afterwards. That's really what conservatism is to me. I don't know. Anyway, Lewis the Hedgehog. Now Republicans are blaming furries of all people for this shooting by claiming the shooter is one, when the chances are good that the people who are more likely to believe this replacement bullshit have by far more in common with those who hate us. I've seen it. I saw that too. I saw in fact, I was gonna post that link, but yeah, that was a thing that Ian Miles Chong put up because he was watching the video because this guy live streamed himself on fucking um, Twitch, and the guy opens his phone and there's furry porn, right? Doesn't mean, of course, he was a furry. Just means that he was in some image board where somebody posted that, this guy was radicalized by places like 4chan and 8kun and that kind of thing. And he admits that in his manifesto. And, I'm sure if you've ever been to either of those places, one thing that you get a lot are funny image memes and shit like that, and lots of porn. And so it doesn't mean this dude was a furry, but even if he was, that doesn't change the fact that he was also a white nationalist. And there actually is a very big um, crossover between like white nationalists, white supremacists, and furries. That just is, There's a video by God, I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a YouTuber that made a video on that about the cross like sectionality between furries and white nationalists, and it's very interesting stuff. It comes from people who tend to be furries or also tend to be people who were alienated as children, who never fit in, stuff like that. Who and they gravitate towards the furry community because the furry community is very accepting, right? And just so happens these are the same people who are vulnerable to white nationalist, white supremacist rhetoric, right? So let me just see how this looks because I'm trying to experiment here. Like one thing that I notice is that I always get really like nitpicky about how it looks at a certain distance, but nobody's going to be looking at this from this angle. They're going to be zooming out and looking at it. So I don't have to be so precise. I guess that's what it is. I don't have to be so like neat and precise here. I can just be a little bit sloppy and not have to worry about it looking bad. Anyway, so yeah, very interesting stuff. Maybe we should do a stream on that eventually one of these days too, right? That's a good segue back into what's going on here. So, speaking of Ian Miles Chong and all that, there was a big pushback after this shooting last week against Tucker Carlson, right? Because Tucker Carlson has been spouting this great replacement shit on his show for years, right? So Tucker Carlson sort of is the biggest thing on Fox News now. He took over the mantle from Bill O'Reilly after Bill O'Reilly was forced out because of his um, Uncle Bill was just a little too sexual harassment-y, right? A little bit too much into sexually harassing women and stuff like that. So he was forced out. Tucker Carlson took over his time slot, and now he's the biggest thing on Fox News. He's the biggest dick on Fox News there, right? And for a number of years, he has been spouting this great replacement shit, right? So I want to play a video here for you guys. Let me just pause that. This here, let me bring this over here. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm sure you've probably all seen this, but I thought it was interesting. Let's just make that a little smaller so I don't get copyrighted or whatnot. Bring that up here. So this is Tucker Carlson's white replacement theory. It's been mirrored by the Buffalo shooters. Let me put this down in the chat for you guys if you want to watch this on your own later. Here we go. And let me make this full screen. And let's just make that a little bit smaller. There we go. So this is from, yeah, let's go ahead and play this.
But they want to figure out who inspired this man and why did he get to this destination. This was a racially motivated attack, and so people's emotion are going to be all over the place, rightfully so.
So that was, I think this is the Status Quo, which is a great channel if you guys have never seen it. Part of the TYT network, I think. But anyway.
An unrelenting stream of immigration, mass immigration, wave of demographic change to change the racial mix of the country. Too much change. By giving them amnesty, and not long after that, by giving them absentee ballots to reduce the political power of people whose ancestors lived here.
So, I just wanted to pause that there. Did you hear that? By giving them amnesty, and then not long after that, absentee ballots. That's a lie, right? He's talking about their people who come here seeking asylum, especially from south of the border. They're seeking asylum because they're being chased by drug gangs and stuff like that, chased by cartels or whatever, right? And you notice he just sort of threw that in there, and then later by getting ballots. But that's not the case. You don't get the right to vote just when you're a refugee in the United States. You have to become a citizen first. It can take 20 years for you to become a citizen. See how the thing is, but your average Fox News viewer has no idea about any of that. All they see is fear, 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 fear. Brown person coming to take away my guns and my land and to sell drugs to my kid. Right? Just wanted to point that out there. See, mass amnesty. Even if that was the case, even if what he's saying here was true and Joe Biden actually was bringing in 7 million, people from Syria or whatever, refugees from Ukraine or, from something like that. Well, I guess they wouldn't care about the Ukrainian refugees because they're white, but, you know, let's say, yeah, like from Syria, Syrian refugees or whatever, or Afghan refugees, something like that. Even if he did bring all these people in, they still, and did give them amnesty, they still would not be able to vote. They would not be able to vote. They would not be replacing anyone. The Democrats would not be able to use them in order to maintain political power. It's a lie. Tucker Carlson knows this is a lie. He's saying it anyway because this is making him money, because this is bringing his viewers in. This is why he's saying it. Well, and then also because he's a racist piece of shit. Let's keep that in mind too. Who wants to stoke hatred in this country and is probably jizzing in his pants every time one of these fucking shooters shows up and acts on what he fucking says, I have no way of knowing that, of course. That is just an insult from my side. I'm just insulting Tucker Carlson. I'm not actually saying he jizzes in his pants every time there's a mass shooting. But, Am I supposed to believe that he's lying to me when he says these things on the air? I mean, anyway, let's continue.
and dramatically increase the proportion of Americans newly arrived from the third world. The left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement. In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement. Shut up, you're dying, we're going to replace you. The replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries. New people, more obedient voters from the third world. They don't complain, they don't file HR complaints, they just do what they're told.
More obedient voters. You know, it's like, I mean, the thing is, it's you can picture your grandparents at home watching this shit. My grandparents were like all over this on my mom's side before when they were alive. They're both dead now. But, my grandfather watched Fox News fucking religiously and believed every fucking thing that this guy and Bill O'Reilly said, right? And it's like, that's the thing about it. They might, the people that believe this stuff, they're not fringe like skinheads anymore. They're not like Nazi skinheads, like, you know, people out there robbing banks trying to start the race war. Not anymore. They're like normal people now. They're people within your family, your parents, your grandparents, right? It's like the entire Republican Party has been radicalized. And that's the really scary thing about it. You know what I mean? That now like you see these, shootings and stuff like this. It's like how many more of these are going to happen, right? Because it's not just like crazy people anymore. They're not like the Overton window has been moved as much as you don't want to admit that, right? They kind of like accomplish that goal. That's one thing that like the white supremacists and the identitarians and all those people, if you venture into any of these areas where these people hang out, you know, if you ever try to like go and just to, sometimes I do. Sometimes I go and just to like lurk, see what these people are talking about, right? Although a lot of it has been moved to like private Discord servers and stuff, so it's not as open as it used to be. Like, it used to be there were places on Reddit, that kind of thing, and all these people have been chased off of Reddit, and now they're like on Telegram and like a lot of private Discord servers. So it can be sort of, hard to like search these people out, right? But if you ever do go and just sort of lurk and see what the other side is talking about, it's like, you know, all of the they're not insane white, it's basically mainstreaming now, right? And that's one thing that they always say we wanted to change the Overton window. We want to like change the political discussion in this country so that, the things we believe become mainstream. And Tucker Carlson is making that happen, you know. We're already seeing politicians and shit starting to talk about this stuff. Matt Gaetz made a few tweets about like the great replacement theory, right? And it's like, man, all we need is for one of these assholes to become president and it's over. So, anyway, about one more minute left of this.
Have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that?
They can't win re-election in 2022 unless they bring in a large number of new voters to replace the voters that are already here. We have an invasion in this country.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, please remember that guy that just said that, complete lie. New people that, immigrants that come into the country today will not be citizens in time to vote in 2022. That's a 100% lie. Even the most fast-tracked even if you were to fast track it, the fastest way that you become a citizen, it still takes like 7 years. Like, for most people it takes like 23 years, but even if they like, manage to like move that ahead, it's like you know, there's no method legally where you can just show up to the country and within 2 years be a citizen. That's just not a thing that happens. It's not possible. They're fucking lying. Like,
downsides of all of this are becoming very obvious to everybody. In fewer than 20 years, the culture their parents and grandparents had built evaporated. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided. You think that the little piece of America you're responsible for, that you represent in the Congress, would be...
Makes it dirtier, because of those stinking, dirty brown people, right? Yeah, he's not racist at all, right? No, Tucker Carlson is just concerned about demographic changes. Has nothing to do with race, obviously.
Clean, but hers isn't. Why?
Well, part of the reason is because her district is actually one of the least American districts in the country.
One rule about America is we pick up our shit. We don't leave it by the side of the road. Sorry, not allowed. We don't do that here. I want to live in a clean country. They don't want you to know that there's an option to the chaos and filth and crime growing all around us.
All right, that's enough of that. Fuck this guy. You notice that last thing he said where we pick up our shit?
Turn to the
That's
new
of
pressure.
course quiet, shut up. That is of course in reference to another very favorite conspiracy theory that the right wing likes to talk about, where they say things like there is human feces on the streets in liberal cities because of homeless people, right? Which is another kind of bullshit talking point. The thing is, in any city with any number of homeless people, there will be shit on the streets, right? It happens everywhere. It's in every city, everywhere around the entire world, right? People, especially when you do have homeless people, they shit on the streets. Why? Because there's no access to bathrooms, right? People who are even not homeless will do this all the time. How many times have you been driving and some guy pulls over to the side of the road, takes a crap in a bush, pees in a bush, takes a crap there, something like that, right? Happens all the fucking time. But no, it's because there was a report that came out a few years back about San Francisco, and measured the amount of human feces on the street in San Francisco. And so they like to say that the liberal cities are literally drowning in human shit, where it's get the fuck out of here. It's the dumbest fucking thing ever. And if that was the only problem, I mean, please, and I'm not trying to say, yeah, San Francisco and, Los Angeles, yeah, there's a big problem with homeless people, right? The problem is not homeless people taking shits on the street. The problem is there's too many fucking homeless people. We need to do something about it, right? But any state, any big city in any state in this country has that problem. And it's just more because in California there's more people than in Houston. San Francisco has a bigger population than say Houston or fucking, New Orleans or something like that. And that's why it's a bigger problem there. But it's not like you can go to any other city where there's homeless people and not see, people shitting on the street. It's just they do. They do because they're people. And especially if you go around the rest of the world. It's like the dumbest fucking thing to rally on. But it's something that it's become part of the conservative mythos out there. And it's these people believe the stupidest fucking shit. Seriously. Anyway, so that was Tucker Carlson talking about the Great Replacement Theory because, he has been doing it for years on his channel. Now, something I think Media Matters put out a thing where they said he had around 400 instances where he brought it up, something like that. So it's very common. This guy is talks about this stuff all the time. Now, it is wrong to say that Tucker Carlson is responsible for the Buffalo shooter, because he's not. He did not put the gun in the Buffalo shooter's hands and drive him to the, grocery store and tell him to murder people. He did not do that, right? So, but the reason why people are giving Tucker Carlson shit over this is because he is spouting the exact same thing that this murderer did, right? This is what the Great Replacement Theory is. What Tucker Carlson is saying is the sanitized version. Tucker Carlson is not talking about white genocide, right? He's using this is basically the sanitized version of the Great Replacement theory. The idea that they're just going to come and vote us out. He's not saying the other stuff that like, oh, they're trying to outbreed us and all this other things, and they're going to drive white people extinct or whatever. He's not saying that shit, but he's presenting it in such a way that mainstream Republicans can identify with it. So if someone who's just slightly, has predispositions to conservative ideas, someone who doesn't instantly get turned off at the racist language, right? He made it digestible for them. And that's something that we got to understand, right? So when there's degrees to racism, okay? It is true to say that most of the people in the country who hold racist ideas would not call themselves racist. They would not say to themselves, I think white people are superior, blah, 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 blah. They would not say that. They would say most people who would be like vulnerable to this form of attack, if you were to ask them if they were racist, they would say no, right? Because when most people think racism, they think, do you treat people equally? That's kind of how racism has been framed in the United States for the last, you know, 60 years, right? Because that was sort of like the main point of the first like wave against, segregation and stuff like that, was treating people equally, right? And most people would say, yeah, I treat people equally, you know, in my daily life and all that stuff and blah, 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 blah. They would not consider something like, say, voting against a policy to allow, you know, allow undocumented migrants a pathway to citizenship. They would not consider that racist, right? They would say something like, well, because then you get they would say something like, well, they need to do it legally in the same way that the legal immigrants came, because that makes it equal. See what I'm saying? So it's very, and most people would even say like something like, even people who would use like, they would say things like, well, I don't think, like, say, people who were like discriminate against black people, for example, they would say something like, well, I don't think that they're inferior. I just don't like them for XYZ reason. And that's because that's how racism has been framed in the United States. It's been framed as a tolerance kind of way. Like, you know what I mean? Like the idea that, you don't have to like them, they just have to be equal under the law, right? And so they don't see stuff like that. They don't see things like systemic racism. They don't believe in stuff like that, right? They don't they don't say, like, they say things like if you try to promote equality or whatever, and then like that's why they're very like vulnerable to attacks like against like for example the critical race theory attack that you're seeing a lot. How the right wing is calling everything that has to do with like equality and teaching about the history of racism, how they're calling it critical race theory. They're very vulnerable to that line of attack, because to them it looks like people of color and minorities are getting special privileges, right? That's what it looks like. It looks like that they're being treated, and then they think that as a white person I'm not being treated equally, right? And that's how they're vulnerable to this sort of, so then you get somebody like that who, and this would be a person that in real life would not do something negative towards anybody of color. They would not consider themselves racist at all, even though these ideas, like what we kind of think of as racism, they don't believe in that. They don't see the power dynamic in racism. I guess you could put it that way. They're just looking at it from like an equality perspective, and they don't see the power dynamic. They don't see how institutions can reinforce, racist policies, right? That have been proven in the past to have, promote and well, not promote, but just result in like disparities of outcome. Like, for example, how people of color like didn't really get to take advantage of the GI Bill. That's a good example of that. That's a good example of institutional racism right there that most people are not aware of, or redlining, how a black person tries to buy a house, but bank won't give them a loan unless they get it for a house that's in a black neighborhood. That's a perfect example of how most people, white people are not aware of that. And if you were to sit some of these people down and explain this to them, they might understand it. So that's always why it's a good idea not to come off like a screaming crazy person whenever you see somebody support something like this. It's like, you know, reserve that for the straight up Nazis, right? At least in my opinion. Reserve the crazy like hateful rhetoric for Nazis because fuck those people, for white supremacists, for people like Nick Fuentes and like fuck those people. Say whatever the fuck you want to those people. Punch Richard Spencer in the face. Nobody gives a fuck, right? But, like your average conservative who may be supporting something that, you know, and they don't, it could very well be that they just don't understand how and why it's bad, where the racism's coming in. It sounds like a perfectly reasonable policy to them, you know. Oh, it could even be something like let's cut taxes for rich people and then raise it on people during a certain demographic, you know, or it could be something very simple like requiring an ID to vote in certain states. And you go, well, they don't understand how that's going to hurt people of color, right? They don't understand how, or shutting down voting um, polling places in certain areas. They don't understand how that disenfranchises people and how it's like specifically aimed at people of color. And it's like, well, you should always try to take the the time to actually try to make these people understand before you jump down their throat about it because, I really do think a lot of these people that you would consider, who support these things, who don't consider themselves to be out and out white supremacists, I really do think that they can be like, if the proper information got out there and they could be made to understand and they would even support our policies, right? There are always going to be people who are just beyond saving, people like Tucker Carlson, people like Nick Fuentes, people like fucking John Doyle's another one. And they're just not worth saving. And to those people, fuck them. Fuck them, say all the nasty shit you want because, it's not worth wasting your time trying to reform somebody like that, but your average ordinary person who may even be in your own family who just happens to vote conservative, you know, who is generally not a bad person regardless, don't reserve the hate for them. Try to reason. Those are the people who are open to reason, right? Anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, sorry folks. So yeah, a lot of people jumped down, getting back to our subject here. A lot of people jumped down Tucker Carlson's throat after this shit happened because he deserves it, because he was spouting this shit on his show. A lot of conservative and right wing, sort of like alt right influencers came to his defense. Um, Nick Fuentes came on Telegram. Nick Fuentes is the leader of America First and bona fide dyed in the wool white supremacist. He came on Telegram and called the Buffalo attack a false flag. So there you go. It was just it was all a conspiracy in order to make the America First style, conservative people look bad, obviously. Arizona State Senator Wendy Rogers claimed that Gendron was a federal agent. So, according to this, is a state senator, someone who's in the government making laws in Arizona, thinks that the United States government got, like, say, an FBI agent or someone who's in the United States government, and sent them out to murder 10 people at a grocery store for some reason. You know, that's, yep, people in Arizona need to vote better. Right. Mike Cernovich did this tweet here, and I will put this down in the chat for you guys. Let me just copy that and put this down here for you guys. Mike Cernovich is, of course, a misogynist sort of right-wing, borderline alt-right, influencer. Here's his tweet here in regards to this, talking about the Buffalo shooter. The manifesto of the terrorist who killed people today contains the following. He did a chart of Jewish people, included me under troll Jew, rejection of Christianity, and admission that he is an authoritarian left-wing hybrid Nazi and green nationalism. Which he did say these things, right? He did not say that he is authoritarian left wing. He did not say that in his manifesto. He did say some of these other things. He did say what he said was that when he was 13, that he had a much more left wing ideology when he was 13 years old, right? And he said in his manifesto, however, that he was radicalized on 4chan and is now super right wing. So Mike Cernovich is lying here, trying to spread disinformation about this Buffalo shooter. Makes no surprise there because Mike Cernovich is a piece of shit. We should talk about him one of these days. Let's turn that off. Ian Miles Chung is also another right-wing shitposter who went on. Ian Miles Chung is sort of like the um, poor man's, I guess, Tim Pool is how you would describe Ian Miles Chung. Ian Miles Chung is sort of like somebody who made a oh, here, let's turn on. I want to turn on one of their here's one of his tweets from Ian Miles Chung talking about Peyton Gendron, right? This is the Buffalo shooter. Pay attention to the symbol on his chest. It's used by the Azov battalion in Ukraine, right? So that's Ian Miles Chung here, comparing this guy to, trying to kill two birds with one stone here, because, the right wing in this country is very much in support of Vladimir Putin for some fucking reason. So here he goes trying to discredit the shooter and also suck Putin's dick at the same time, right? So let's see. Here's another one from Ian Miles Chong. Let's open that. Every shooting I've seen involves a person responding to somebody saying literally every shooting I've ever seen involves a gun. So trying to run interference there because, as soon as we get giant mass shootings like this, people tend to talk about gun control. So, got to put the kibosh on that if you're a Second Amendment citizen here, right? Obviously, it's not the gun that caused the shooting. Obviously, it was because the guy was some kind of crazy leftist or whatever, BLM type. That's why he shot all these people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, very astute observation there, Mr. Chong. Here's one where Ian Miles Chong seems to talk about he seems to be supporting Tucker Carlson when Tucker Carlson spreads his white genocide great replacement theory conspiracy, right? They call this a conspiracy, and then of course you can see Tucker Carlson talking about supporting immigration reform and blah 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 blah. Please keep in mind Ian Miles Chong is not white. He is, I don't know what his ethnicity is, but not a white person, so it's like he's basically supporting people who would deport him. Keep that in mind too, that the white nationalists, the white supremacist people like this guy Gendron, if they wouldn't straight up kill you, the alternative of them to just straight killing you is forcible deportation. So if the people that Ian Miles Chong is supporting with this tweet were to actually take power, they would kick him out of the country because he's not white. Remember that, there's when you're all these people like him, Candace Owens, people like Dave Rubin, all of those people, they're just useful idiots to the right wing here. And if you think that they're going to like, be nice to you when they finally take over or whatever and turn this place into a fascist hellhole, think again. You're going to be right up there on the chopping block. You're going to be right there up against the wall with the rest of us, you know, because you're not white. If you're not white, you're not Christian. According to these people, you don't have rights. This is exactly the truth. This is my favorite tweet of his that I've seen so far from Ian Miles Chung. It's a conspiracy theory to suggest that Democrats treat tragedies as opportunities for political advantage. The projection is strong with this one, I must say. Here's the thing about this. Let's turn this fucking asshole off, right? I'll put all of these down later in the chat for you guys so that you can see them all for yourselves later. Here's the thing about that, we wouldn't have these tragedies if Democrats and especially progressives actually managed to get some of their, you know, um, policies actually passed. You know, I mean, especially when you're talking about mass shooters, right? Well, if we actually did have adequate gun control in this country, there wouldn't be mass shooting. Okay, there wouldn't. You know, and what's the conservative solution to mass shootings? What's their solution? They don't have a solution, right? Their solution is to do nothing. They like it how it is. They like the idea that people can go buy high-powered weapons and with very little in the way of background checks or anything like that, and that they can go and murder people. They want to keep it like that. They like that. This is what they want, right? We never talk about this. You never hear about that in the news either. It's like, well, what would you do, Senator Rand Paul? What would you do, Matt Gaetz? What would you do, Marjorie Taylor Greene? What would you do, Donald Trump, in order to stop this, right? They always, you know what they always do? They talk about like, oh, we need to, um, we need to talk about fucking mental illness and hopes and prayers and all this other shit, blah 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 blah, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they never propose anything of substance. Zero. Nothing that will actually stop another mass shooter. Democrats, even though they're weak and ineffectual, they're the only ones with any kinds of ideas at all to try to prevent further tragedies. So don't tell me that it's like being, no. Show me what you got. Show me what you got. What's your solution to this, right? What's your solution? Because if your solution is this is acceptable, then that's not a fucking solution. If your solution is this is the price of freedom, oh yeah, well, the Constitution says we're allowed to have guns, and so there's always going to be mass shootings because we need that in order to keep our constitutional right for gun. Bullshit. That's bullshit. That's bullshit defeatist thinking that shows a lack of ideas. Give me your fucking ideas. Bernie Sanders has ideas about gun control, right? AOC has ideas about gun control, right? What's your fucking idea? You don't like their ideas? You don't like how their proposals of how to stop, how to limit the access of dangerous firearms into people like who will go and commit fucking massacres in the name of like dangerous ideology. All right, fine. That's fine. What's your idea? Let me fucking hear it. And until you have an idea, then shut the fuck up. That's the other idea. If you don't have any clue about what to do, about how you can stop mass shootings, right? Then shut the fuck up. You don't get to complain when people want to take away your fucking guns. Give me an alternative, right? I never hear an alternative from these people at all. You know, from especially from Second Amendment people, they don't have solutions, and that's what you got to remember, right? The right wing in this country does not have solutions, right? Because we are living the life we are living now is the result of conservative policies in this country. They don't give a fuck. They like it like this. This is what they want. They want wages to be low. They want people to be on the brink of like fucking homelessness all the time. They want people to be able to kill each other. Like with like very little in the standing in the way. This is what they want, you know? Are you conservative? You don't want this? Tell me your fucking alternative. Such bullshit, man. Anyway, so yeah, the right wing has just been kind of like, spending all the time they can in order to try to deflect from this. Um, Fox News themselves went quiet on the Great Replacement theory here. I'm not going to open this, but here is an article basically from the Guardian talking about how when the coverage of this on Fox, coverage of this guy Gendry, just basically didn't talk about his motivations at all. It just completely forgot to mention the fact that he was a white supremacist and that he was motivated by the Great Replacement theory. And it's actually a pretty good read. And basically, the takeaway is, well, they couldn't mention it because their headliner show was spouting this shit every single fucking night. So how are they gonna like talk about how it's bad when in 2 hours Tucker Carlson's gonna come on and say the exact same fucking thing, just like more sanitized, right? So it was, I think it basically says there was one Fox News host who mentioned it once, which is like appalling, absolutely appalling, man. Like, how can anybody take these fucking people seriously? I don't understand it. Like, anyway, so that's pretty fucking horrible. So we know that this dude Gendron, of course, was motivated by all this because, like I said before, he wrote a 180-page manifesto, very similar to the Christchurch shooting in 2019. And it should be, the guy Brendan Tarrant, that was his name. Um, Reminder of the Christchurch shooting. So Brendan Tarrant in New Zealand drives to a mosque in Christchurch and live streams himself on Facebook Live, blowing away 51 people, murdering them, and then driving to another mosque and then shooting 4 more people, and then finally being apprehended by the police as he was attempting to drive to yet another mosque. He also wrote a really huge, ridiculous fail manifesto as well, fail festo, I guess. And it should come to no surprise that Gendron's manifesto is heavily plagiarized by the Christchurch manifesto, right? And he even says in his manifesto that he was inspired by the Christchurch shooter. So, and that's, like we said before, these Nazi types are not the brightest bulbs in the package. Not exactly firing on all 4 thrusters, and don't really tend to think for themselves or have much in the way of imagination or even intelligence. So it doesn't really surprise me at all that the guy would basically just plagiarize the vast majority of his manifesto there. And if you think I'm lying about that, I got something for you. This is somebody took, let me just hang on a second, close all of this stuff. Let me just take this. So somebody took both manifestos, put them up on difference checker, right? So there's a link to it. If you want to read these for yourself, which I highly recommend not doing, but I just want to show you. This is the Christchurch manifesto here on the left. This is Gendron's manifesto on the right. And you can kind of see which ones are exactly so here, when everything's highlighted, that means it's different. And then when you see here, for example, these lines are the same, kind of shows you how much exactly the guy copied straight out of the Christchurch Manifesto. Look at that. It's like the exact same thing. Some of it is word for huge blocks of text like this. The exact same fucking thing over and over and over and over, right? And it's like the same intro. He just basically went, changed a couple of things here and there, left out some stuff, right? And then he also seems to add a whole bunch where he talks about guns and shit like that. A very large portion of it seems like he just sort of took the other guy's manifesto and just wrote a bunch of shit over it, you know. Here we go. Look at this. Democracy is the only solution. Why are you committing to force? Over here, democracy is the only solution. Why are you committing to force? It's the exact same thing, because Nazis are fucking stupid. So, anyway, he basically says in his manifesto that he was, like I said, um, radicalized by 4chan. And I want to read a little bit of this, right? Because the other guy, basically did the exact same thing. It's like this is almost like a copycat kind of killer, right? The other guy, Brenton, what the fuck is his name again? Brenton Tarrant. He went and he did the exact same thing, live streamed it on Facebook Live. Went up basically, and before he started shooting people, said subscribe to PewDiePie, and then started shooting people. Right? This dude did like the exact same fucking thing, just live streamed it on Twitch instead. Keep in mind that in 2019, this guy Gendron was 15 years old, right? I mean, that's 3 years ago. He's 18 now. So that's how young these people are. Like very young. The other guy, the Christchurch guy, was 21. These are young kids. These are not like grizzled, like fucking disaffected white people who have like been screwed their whole lives and fallen down the alt-right pipeline or whatever, that were radicalized because of a life of bad living and they can't get a job or whatever and they're blaming it on minorities. No, no, no. These are like young fucking kids who really, if they just would have like been exposed to somebody with like a counter narrative, probably wouldn't have fallen into this, right? That's really all it would have took in order to stop this. Would just to be to get somebody there, somebody in running in the circles where this guy was running, somebody on 4chan or 8kun or whatever saying this is all bullshit, you know, somebody on on YouTube, right? Making a video saying this is all bullshit. Don't fall for it. Blah blah blah. Racism is bad, right? White nationalism is horseshit. There is no conspiracy theory. There is no white genocide conspiracy theory. It's if there was just somebody, and you can only think of what may have happened if there was a prevailing counter narrative, you know, if one of his friends, for example, because I'm sure the guy probably had at least one friend, right? If one of his friends, for example, would have gone on there and said, "Hey, you know, stop reading this shit. This is bullshit. Stop reading this fucking baloney. Let me tell you why." Right? If there was, this is why it matters. This is why it matters to fight against this stuff, right? And there's plenty of people out there that are making good headway against this. Somebody like Counterpoints, for example, right? Makes excellent videos about trans rights and the trans experience. And, has done a good job of de-radicalizing people and making people understand that trans people are like normal, ordinary people, right? We need something like that, but against white supremacy, you know, because this shit is dangerous. This shit is dangerous, and these people vote, right? You know. So anyway, I was going to read a bunch of his shit here But I'd put it there. I don't want to like. Plus, I don't want to get my stream killed for Anyway, I don't want to get my stream killed by reading the manifesto of a mass murderer. So I'm not going to do that, but it's in the chat there if you guys want to go check it out for yourself. It's filled with ridiculous, easily debunked bullshit that somebody with half a brain and 10 seconds of googling can disprove, right? And you got to remember that conservatives don't do that. Conservatives don't do research. So it matters when you confront people, when you talk to people, when you engage with them. It matters to be, prepared. And it also matters to try to reason with these people. Try to talk to them about why this shit's wrong, and you could be saving someone's life later on. You know, the person you argue with. And even if you don't win the argument per se, because usually 99% of the time when you engage with someone on, say, Reddit or on YouTube or in Facebook or something, anything, wherever, whatever the platform is, 99% of the time when you engage with someone else, they just basically end up blocking you or just leaving and calling you a name or whatever, right? That's fine. Okay, that's the most you can do, is to just have that countering narrative. Because there may be a couple of times where you do convince someone. And, keep that in mind too. It's not going to be every single time. And, I have myself gotten a couple of messages from people. Someone who's seen one of my old videos on libertarianism, for example, and said that I got them thinking, and I've managed to change their mind about a couple things. And that's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to get that, to know that, like, you know, I've swayed someone. The power of my argument was good enough to sway someone over to my side. Because not only will they support the stuff that you support, but you also are steering them away from these dangerous channels where they may get radicalized and end up at a grocery store with a fucking, assault rifle, right? This shit matters. We've kind of passed the point where it's just like normal ordinary discourse. Now it's sort of like we're fighting for like not only the soul of America, but people's actual lives. We're fighting for people's actual lives, people who may actually end up dead, because some fucking, some lunatic out there with like a, got on the wrong fucking website and shit when they were 16 and 5 years later turned into a fucking maniac, right? How do you prevent that from happening? This is one way. One way is by reaching out and, not being a giant dick right off the bat to people, you know, when they say something that is like, slightly racist, right? Just trying to, I mean, I don't know. That's the approach I've been taking lately is trying to not be a huge, massive douchebag to people and like trying to use reason and stuff until you can figure out who they are. And then if you realize that they're like, if this person is beyond hope, then that's when you bust out like with the fucking punch a Nazi memes or whatever, right? But I've been trying to give people a chance. I've been trying to do that. I think that gets better results. Anyway, there is of course a video here where Tucker Carlson is. Let's put this down in the chat here. I want to spend the last 10 minutes or so going over this because this is hilarious and crazy. It is called. Oh wait, I have to allow ads. Fuck you. Okay, I will allow ads once. It is called Tucker, the Great Replacement Theory is Coming from the Left. So let me just skip the ad here. And as soon as the ad is finished playing, then we can start the video. Actually, I don't know. Do you want to watch this? I kind of don't want to watch this. Anyway, I put it down in the chat for you guys. Basically, long story short, let's not watch Tucker Carlson again. Long story short, he basically blames it on the Democrats. Maybe you know what we'll do? This Wednesday, we'll take this video and we'll go over it and respond to it. We'll save this video for the next stream. We'll do it on Wednesday night because I think it is worth watching. You know, just to see how he sort of weasels. He's trying to like weasel his way out of like all of the shit that he's been saying for like 5 years and stuff. Right? And it's kind of pathetic. It's sort of like Tucker Carlson knows he fucked up and like knows that people are going to start associating him with this and this could end his career. At least I hope so. I don't know. I mean, these are conservatives we're talking about, and they seem to like not give a fuck about anything that their chosen fucking talking head says. So who knows? But yeah, that'll be for next time. Let's read some comments and then we'll go ahead and end this here. Let's see what we got here. Lewis the Hedgehog. Even if he is a furry, so what? If a serial killer likes rock music, does that make everyone who likes rock music serial killers? Exactly. I mean, that's the logical stance there, but you know what it does? The fact that the guy like had furry porn on his phone and it wasn't even like it was just like a meme. It wasn't even furry porn. Like that allows the right wing to feed this narrative that he was a degenerate. And then they can instantly say from degenerate that he was a leftist because that's they've equated people's minds, they've equated sexual deviancy with leftism. And not just when I say sexual deviancy, I mean anything that isn't like white Christian monogamous man on top like missionary position sex. Right? Like anything that isn't like straight hetero boring ass vanilla like, you know, vanilla sex is considered sexual deviancy. And so they can try to claim that the guy was a leftist. So that's why it matters. He's a furry, he must be a leftist. Right? Keep in mind, I mean, it was just on his phone for half a second, and we don't know what it actually was. You know, chances are he was probably on Discord or something, and somebody posted that as like a meme. You barely see it for like half a second, so it's like, no, that it's not even evidence that the guy was a furry, you know. But yeah, it's like it just allows them to deflect, is what that does, right? Let's see. Dinah Cat loves me. I remember Nick Fuentes dating a cat boy, but I don't think he was a furry. What? Nick Fuentes dating a cat boy? Really? Cat boy. You mean as in like another male person? Let me see here. Nick Fuentes, cat boy. The cat boy harem of Nicholas J. Fuentes. Okay. Secret Kitty Boy fantasies. Wow. I'm gonna have to read this because if he actually is like, wait. He really likes cat boys. To be clear, I'm gonna have to follow up on that. That would explain a lot if Nick Fuentes was into men who dressed up in cat suits. Okay, that explains the inceldom. That explains the white, the anti-gay bigotry, the homophobia there. You know, because Nick Fuentes is not being true to his inner self. Holy fucking shit! You know, one thing when you always hear from people when they people who are like homophobic, they always say, I'm not afraid of gay people. So that term homophobia doesn't apply. And it's like, no, you are afraid of gay people. What you're afraid of is that you yourself might be gay. And that's why the term homophobia is 100% like valid and descriptive, right? Because it seems like just really seems like all these people who are seriously bigoted against gay people. Why is it that like almost every single fucking time we turn out that they tend to have a little bit going on in the closet that we're not aware of? Madison Cawthorn, for example, was super anti-gay, and video comes out of him fucking face fucking his cousin and getting felt up in the car and all this other shit by like his male staffers and everything. And it's like, man, and it just makes it, hypocritical because, Madison Cawthorn, for example, was part of the moral majority, like, family values kind of crowd. And it's like, if you were just true to yourself, maybe you wouldn't have lost the fucking election. You guys hear about that? Madison Cawthorn lost his primary. It's like, good riddance. Good, fuck him. I wanted to talk about him a little bit in the stream too, but we'll save him for later. He had this very sort of sour grapey kind of like, he like made this post where he was talking about dark MAGA and getting revenge and shit like that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but we'll save that for next time too, the dark MAGA thing. Dark MAGA seems to be like the latest incarnate. Like, dark MAGA seems to be like basically just mask off fascism is what it looks like. But I don't know. I need to do more research on that before I can talk about it. I don't know, guys. Seems like if all these people were just true to themselves, they'd be much happier, huh? But no, they know where their bread is buttered. Let's see. Rob Black, lock Tucker up, then Nicole Wallace. Yes, well, I agree, but unfortunately, we can't just throw people in prison for saying shit in this country. That is ultimately why these things happen, because we have the freedom of speech. And this is, believe it or not, freedom of speech. It would be against Tucker Carlson's freedom of speech to throw him in jail for saying the shit that he's saying. You know, Although you could make the argument that inciting violence is not protected by the First Amendment. But does Tucker Carlson ever say that you should go get a gun and kill immigrants? No, he doesn't say that. He just alludes to it. He just says things like, oh, if something isn't done, if we allow this to continue, shit like that. He just says those kinds of things. He gives himself plausible deniability, right? So, yes, he is responsible, but legally there's nothing we can really do to stop him. We cannot get the police and throw Tucker Carlson in prison. That's just, you know, not possible, and I wouldn't support that anyway. I wouldn't support throwing him in jail for saying this shit. I would support throwing him off of Fox News, throwing him off of the TV. I could see somewhere there being a litmus test for hate speech that allows the government to regulate speech. And I could see that falling within the limits on free speech, because there are limits on free speech. The free speech is not an unlimited right. You are not allowed to incite violence. You're not allowed to spread, you're not allowed to spread speech that results in people getting injured or killed. The classic example is shouting fire in a crowded theater, that kind of thing. So we already accept that there are limits to free speech. I guess the question is should this be one of them? Should hate speech be one of them? And so far, the courts have said no. You know, there is no limit on hate speech. And you'll even get organizations like the ACLU, for example, supporting this. And so it's like, I could see it from both ways. I think it's more effective now for us to just compete against hate speech with anti-hate speech. That seems to be the only effective way that we have of fighting it right now, you know. And maybe that's the best way. Maybe we shouldn't have, maybe we don't want to go down that slippery slope where the government starts determining what you can and can't say. You know what I mean? That's not a good thing at all. But I don't see anything wrong with, say, sending, angry letters to Fox News or boycotting their advertisers. That is falls in with us expressing ourselves through our freedom of speech, does it not? So, cancel culture, that kind of thing. Canceling people. If what the fuck is cancel culture good for if it's not, what the fuck is it even there for if we're not going to use it to fight hate speech, right? This is the kind of thing that, we should be canceling him. That's what we should do. Cancel Tucker Carlson. Anyway, what do we got here? Lewis a Hedgehog. Tucker, or no, Dynacat. Tucker claims he's never heard of the theory. Yep, of course he has. Of course he would say that. Yeah, that's all part of his fucking rhetoric. He knows exactly what he's fucking saying. That's the thing, right? Tucker Carlson knows exactly what he's saying, and and like I said, it's plausible deniability, so that he can like claim that he doesn't know it and all this. It's such fucking bullshit. I mean, it really is like sad how people fall for this shit, and it's like our schools aren't going to teach people how to think critically. We kind of have to do it ourselves. I mean, this is why I think, yeah, like our best plan of attack, like I just said, is a counter narrative. Yeah, that's kind of why I make videos, right? And I encourage other people to do it too. And even if you don't want to make videos or whatever, that's fine. You don't have to make videos, but engage people online. Engage with them. Like, there's a large part of the left, part of progressives, especially progressives that don't like engaging, and they just like would rather just block people and not, because occasionally you'll get trolls and shit, and that kind of thing. And it's not just blocking the trolls, but like they just want to block everybody who doesn't agree with them out of their lives completely, you know? And that's not the right way to go about it. The right way to do it is to engage people. It matters, especially if it's someone that you know personally. If it's a relative or something, you got like a racist uncle or whatever, don't just block them out of your life. Like, engage. If it's someone you know personally, that means you already have a leg up. That means that person in some way respects you, right? And people are more likely to listen to opposing viewpoints from people they respect than from total strangers. So that means you already got a leg up. So if you got a friend who's like believes in some of this shit, friend who's falling down the incel alt-right pipeline, something like that, you got a relative who's just an old school bigot, whatever, you know, don't just kick them out of Thanksgiving and be like, okay, I'm not inviting Uncle fucking Rufus or whatever to Christmas anymore. Don't just do that. Engage with his ass. Why do you believe these things? This is why this is wrong. This is the actual facts. You know, that's why facts matter. That's another thing, because these people tend to believe in conspiracy theories, and conspiracy theories, being what they are extremely easy to debunk, and that's the easiest way to make headwind against this stuff is to start debunking conspiracy theories. So, why do you believe that Democrats are importing people, for example? Well, here's the real thing on that. That's not actually happening because of XYZ. You know, that didn't actually happen. This didn't actually happen. There really is no, the same way, think of it like convincing someone that vaccination is good. You have the crazy relative that believes vaccination is wrong because it's filled with like, you know, baby fetus, cells and demonic entities or whatever. How would you approach that? Just do the exact same thing, but with racism, right? And one of two things will happen. They'll either listen to you or they won't. And if they don't listen to you, oh well, no harm, no foul, right? You didn't want this person coming to Thanksgiving anyway. Now they have a reason not to show up. And if they do listen to you, then congratulations. You just did your part to like de-radicalize someone. That's how we got to approach this stuff, one person at a time, right? Anyway, let's see. Dynacat, didn't the Christchurch killer copy most of his manifesto too? I don't know. Did he? Was there an earlier? I think there was one in 2012, I think. Another, let me see. Let's look that up. Christ Church shooter plagiarized manifesto. I see, all of the things are coming from the most of the manifesto. I researched the Christchurch shooter and media isn't going to reporting this. Let me see. Let's go to under Google search. You can do any time, and let's do past year. I think I need to do minus Buffalo. Buffalo. There we go. Let's see what comes up. Imagine history. El Paso. Was it the El Paso shooter? No, it must include. Andrus Breivik. Yeah, did he copy that from Andrus Breivik? Andrus Breivik was the shooter in where the fuck was Andrus Breivik from? I think he was in Northern Europe, right? Yeah, okay, that's what it was. Yeah, fucking so the Christchurch guy copied most of his shit from Andrus Breivik. Right. So Andrus Breivik was he was the dude that he was in it was in Norway, and he went to like this island where there was like a camp where a bunch of teenagers were, and went there and shot up like a bunch of yeah, like right, okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, see? Like we said, fucking right wingers don't have much in the way of imagination, right? When did Anders Breivik happen anyway? Let me look that up. Let's see. Norway Anders Breivik. I don't know how to spell this guy's name. Norwegian anti-immigrant domestic terrorist. 2011 Norway attacks. That's what it was. He killed 8 people by detonating a van bomb in Oslo and then killed 69 participants of the Workers' Youth League. Wow. That's some crazy shit, right? So he was 1979 is when he was born. So in 2011, how old was that guy? Um, that's 10 years ago. So he was 33. Jesus Christ. So yeah, it looks like he copied most of his manifesto from fucking Andrews Breivik. Wow. 2011. So yeah, that's some fucking crazy shit. We'll have to do a comparison one of these days and see how much exactly of it has been plagiarized. But it looks like yeah, it looks like this dude Buffalo Man copied from fucking Christchurch asshole who copied from fucking Norwegian douchebag. And yeah, see, it just kind of goes, cycle of fucking hatred, right? That just keeps rolling along, you know. And it's not just a one-off thing when one of these psychopaths goes on a rampage. Has implications later on for years and years and years. Shit, that's 10 years ago now, and we're still like dealing with the consequences of just that shooting. That's fucking ridiculous, man. Let's see. Lusa Hedgehog, just to be clear, there may be quite some furry themed fetish content, but anime has way more. Does that make anime a fetish? Um, well, there are people who fetishize anime, but another thing to also remember is the alt-right has always really liked anime as well. And it's kind of for the same reason, but no, anime is not a disgusting fetish, degenerate fetish. No, not at all. I mean, I wouldn't even say furries are degenerates either. They're just into whatever they're into. It's like if it doesn't hurt anybody and you just like it, then who am I to like judge, right? Be whatever you're into. If you think Sonic the Hedgehog and Mickey Mouse and whatever, if that is your thing, then be what your thing is. I mean, it's really no different than I don't know, people who are into giant breasts or lactating, or people who are into like being dominated, or giantess porn. You ever seen giantess porn, or people like get it on from images of like super giant like 200-foot tall women and stuff. Like, I mean, whatever, if that's your thing. I mean, you can't. I don't know. Who am I to judge, right? I don't even believe in the concept of degeneracy to begin with myself. That's not a thing that I believe in, you know? Like, what does that even mean, degenerate? That in order for someone to be in order for that to be like real, then that means there has to be like an objective, like, you know, measurement of morality. And I don't think that there is such a thing as an objective morality. Right. Because in order for there to be objective morality, there has to be some outward force which is projecting morality onto all of us. And I don't believe that's a thing. I believe people make up what they want to believe. I think morality is subjective. And depending on whatever culture you're from, however you were born or raised, or where you live in the world, it means different, morality is different depending on those factors. There are people in Utah, for example, that think it's perfectly fine to not only have multiple wives, but to also marry women who are underage. And that's perfectly morally acceptable to them. There are also places in the Middle East where that is also true. And this is not considered a bad, you know, morally objectable thing, right? There are places in the Middle East where having sex with young boys is considered normal, in Afghanistan and stuff like that, right? Total normal, ordinary thing. If we think we're so superior, let's remember those gun stats from earlier in the stream. You know, we think we're superior in this country, that we have superior morality, yet we allow 42,000 people to be murdered, right? To die every year in this country from an easily preventable thing that other countries don't allow that. You don't see that in places like, Europe or Asia or even most of South America. Although if there was a runner-up for gun deaths, it would be countries in South America like Brazil and stuff. But even in most other countries in South America, Ecuador, for example, even in places where they do have gun rights, like 1 in 3 people in Guatemala as a gun owner, they still don't even have like the per capita deaths even close to what we have, right? So it's like, morality is subjective. I don't know. We could talk more about that later. Anyway, what else we got? Lusa Hedgehog. Plus, bashing gay people was always a sign of being gay yourself. I wonder what bashing furries is a sign of. Yeah, no kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, the way I see it, right, is just everybody should just do their thing, you know? And I don't understand people that like somehow think they're superior by especially by spreading hate or whatever. There's stuff that I mean I think it's perfectly acceptable to express an opinion that certain things may be strange or weird or you don't understand it. Like, I'll admit furry stuff is stuff I don't understand. I don't really, especially the sexual attraction to it, I don't understand it. But I would never try to say that it's degenerate or that it's wrong or should be outlawed or that all the people who are into that are serial killers. No, it's just not my thing, you know. Lots of things are not my thing, right? That doesn't mean that the people who are into those things are degenerates. It's kind of bullshit. Like that, even that term just to me invokes like a sort of unearned superiority. You know what I mean? I really do think that every person in the world is, if you really think that people are equal, then no one is superior to other people. Like, no one person is superior to another person, and everything that we have and are is a product of a combination of inborn genetics and nurture, right? Our environment with I personally think it being in the majority of the environment. I mean, if you really kind of look at it like that and people really are truly equal, then it's sort of like hammers home the idea that it's like, well, no, nobody really has a right to tell anybody else what they're doing is wrong, you know, and the only real measure that you can use is how much are you harming that person, somebody else? How much is what you're saying or engaging in resulting in the harm of against somebody else, right? And if what you're doing is not harming someone else and it's not harming the world, it's not harming society or the environment, then it should be allowed, in my opinion. And I think really that's really the only rational barometer for morality there is, you know, because everything else is just you imposing your will, your opinion on somebody else. If you can't prove that an activity that somebody is doing is harming either themselves or resulting in a negative aspect for society or destroying the environment or killing animals, if you can't like come out with any type of actual negative harm that someone's activity is doing, then you don't have a right, in my opinion, to tell them not to do it. That activity is now valid, and it's just as valid as anything else that you may come up with, like whatever, right? Opens up a lot of stuff, you know, and it actually, I think, is a logical way to look about to think about morality, you know, because there really is no outward force that imposes morality on us. Because if there were, there would be evidence of that, right? If things like, let's say, premarital sex were wrong, objectively, like if there was a God that said premarital sex is wrong, then you would see lightning striking people when they had premarital sex. You would see them being struck with divine retribution. That doesn't happen. Kind of happened in the Bible, didn't it? I remember there's stories being in the Bible where God would strike people dead for the smallest of things, right? Doesn't seem to happen in real life. And that just because there is no arbiter of morality out there. It's all shit people made up, right? So, anyway, we should probably end this. Let's see. We should end this. One more comment. Lewis a hedgehog. Well, actually, the attraction is towards the human elements added on. Anthropomorphic means to add human characteristics. Exactly. Nobody is like wanting to fuck a hedgehog. They just want to fuck a sexy hedgehog girl. Right? And I could understand that. You know, I could understand wanting to get with a sexy cat girl, for example. I personally think cat girls are kind of sexy. You know, like what's her name from Darkstalkers? You ever play Darkstalkers? Darkstalkers? Like Felicia, fucking sexy ass cat girl. I mean, I don't know. What can I say? Anyway, let's go ahead and end this. So here we are now. Kind of see that's a little bland looking, but you know we've got a little bit going up here in the corner, and I think what we'll do here, we'll work on sections, and then when I actually like publish this to the internet, I'm gonna like do close-ups. So I'll have like a close-up of like that section, and then I'll have like the entire thing, and then maybe somebody can like download this and use it as a print or whatever. But yeah, this is going to be another thing that's going to take like literally a fucking year to finish. So let's save that. Anyway, you guys, thank you all for joining me. Really appreciate that for all you guys sticking around. Thank you, Dynacat. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. Thank you, Rob Black, for joining. Really appreciate that. And Adversary Fandon, of course, it was great to see you as always. And I need to do my usual ending stuff. So let me open up my social medias and whatever, as I usually do. Let me see here. And if you haven't, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. You know, I'm sure you hear that all the time, but it actually does matter when people like and subscribe it. It actually does help the algorithm. The videos that have more likes tend to get shared more often. YouTube will suggest them more, and that you know really helps with the you know growing the channel or whatnot. So appreciate that. And if you like what I do and you want to support me, let me turn on my window here. You can go to my SD shop. So let me put this down in the chat for all of you. Of course, you've seen my SD shop before. Obviously, I show it in every stream, but I sell prints and stuff like that. So if you want to help me out and support the channel, you can do it that way. I also do have a Patreon, which I'll put down in the bottom. I still have one Patreon follower. I'm very happy, but it would be nice to get some more. Um, if you want to see more of my artwork, you can check me out here at DeviantArt. I put up all my art that I do in the channel here. Also, my web comic and stuff like that. It all goes up on DeviantArt. Speaking of webcomics, I have a webcomic here. It's hawanja.com, fun for the whole stupid family. It's got ninjas, it's got talking ducks, it's got people getting punched in the face and stuff like that. Please check out my webcomic. And I have another YouTube channel called UCD Videos, which admittedly I haven't really done very much with recently, but I have big plans for. So I'm going to be putting up some lore videos and crap like that, and some um, live play, me playing video games, etc., etc. So that's coming soon. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for joining. Really appreciate everybody. Once again, you guys are great. And I think we're going to be, next Wednesday. At let's do it at 8:30. I'll send out an invite a notification through YouTube, but we will do some more dunking on Tucker Carlson at 8:30 next Wednesday. Hope to see you all there. Adios, everybody.